But the thing that I found rather fascinating is that there's something right here behind you guys in front of me that I didn't know existed until today, since the water levels are as low as they are. At normal times, this high bedrock area is nice and dry during normal conditions. But where I'm walking right now, well, I would be under several feet of water. But due to the current conditions, this river level is getting lower and lower. Also, directly behind you guys is something rather unique related to the old mining days. If you want to find out more, then continue watching. Here in November of 2024, parts of the country, specifically here in Pennsylvania, are currently under a drought. We've not received any measurable rain for quite a few weeks, and that's resulted in quite a few things happening. Number one is there is an outdoor burn ban in effect. There's been several wildfires that have taken place, specifically in the Blue Mountain Ski Resort area. On top of that, people's wells are running dry, and the water companies are asking people to conserve water. But the most noticeable change, and where you can see the drought the most, is the river levels. So we're going to do a little e-bike ride and check out a couple different areas along the Lackawanna and Susquehanna rivers to see what they look like today without any measurable rain in nearly a month. If you'd like to see what this is like, then all you need to do is come along with me. Approaching Lonesome Road here in Old Forge, and just want to show you some of the little creek beds and tributaries are completely bone dry. Not a sign of water anywhere, and it's really prime for fire conditions. This does flow into the Lackawanna River, and we're making our first official stop along the river just a short ways down the road. As I was passing along Lonesome Road, you can definitely see the levels are down. A lot of the island areas or center high pieces are exposed, not only by a few feet, by several feet. Now where we're standing here is down below Bridge Street, which connects Old Forge and Duryea. And I'm standing on a beach area that I actually never knew existed. I have been down here before just to kind of get some pictures and to check out the area or even look down from the bridge. I'd never seen this sandy beach here. It's always been underwater, and pretty much the water has always been up to around there normally. And there's looking at the train bridge right there. That's Reading and Northern that does use that. And the road bridge beyond that is Main Street for Old Forge and Duryea. Now there's still a good bit of water here, but it is down considerably. I would say close to 10 feet it's down, give or take. And the water is slow moving, and it's pretty clear because there's nothing that has caused any disturbance with murkiness, with runoff, with stirring it up, with siltiness. It's just been calm, slow moving water with lack of any measurable rain in nearly a month. So I'm standing in an area where normally I would be under at least a couple feet of water, and little did I know a sandy beach does exist here. Now it actually does get a little bit deeper out there towards the middle, and there are some shallow pockets as well where you can walk out. Actually, we'll do that. We'll go up here on this rocky outcrop. I did bring my underwater camera too if we do find some good holes to maybe peer in under the surface, see what it's like. We will do that. And of course down here in the anthracite coal region, you'd be hard pressed not to find chunks of coal like this just laying around. Now this bridge was built onto this bedrock outcrop here, and normally where we're walking again would be underwater. There's even a little inlet section there, and as we come out you can see some of the drill holes that were used to drill and blast the rock down to create this bridge. And again, I would never be able to stand here normally, and we came from just right there. So this does offer some unique opportunities to explore or to be in areas normally where you can't be unless you were to get wet. And there's looking upstream. Lonesome Road, where I just passed down, is there on the right. And you can see all this is exposed. Now, I will say, most times sections of this are exposed, especially further back. You see a lot of foliage back there. There's some dried up branches and some fake bamboo and some trees there. Those normally are above water unless we do receive some significant rainfall. But right in front of us here, that little island right there is normally underwater or nearly all the way submerged, with just a little bit being exposed. But we're gonna go further down. I do have another area further downriver that I do want to show you because it's a rather unique area, one that I had mentioned before, but not really focused on in my videos. And we're headed there next. Now coming to you from a different part of the Lackawanna River, which is out here to my left, and it's a rather unique area. Not only is a more wider part of the river, there's a lot of exposed bedrock, but there is a constant flow of water flowing from underground into the Lackawanna River. And it is right here ahead of me, and it is known as the Old Forge Borehole. And it's a constant flowing underground geyser of water. And thankfully you guys don't have smell-o-vision because it does stink pretty bad, like rotten eggs and sulfur. And now I'm staying on a manhole cover here. Not only is this water constantly flowing 24/7, it stinks all the time around here, but also has stained the river bright orange, a rust color, from where it expels downstream, where it does eventually meet up with the Susquehanna River. Now what you guys are sitting on is actually a layer of concrete, because the borehole, although it's underground, it doesn't expel right here. It's somewhere behind you guys. The water flows out and comes up to the surface right here. But while we're here, I'm going to share some facts with you, because this area has always intrigued me and interested me, but I just never had a reason to come make a dedicated video of it. But since we are here, we are going to take advantage of that, because my nephew, who did previously go to Penn State, was able to get some information from his school to provide me the details of this borehole and this area. So what I can tell you is that flowing out of here is acid mine drainage, as we already know. It's basically acidic water from the abandoned coal mines. It's made up of iron oxide, which is iron deposits that are disturbed from the coal mining and are discharged due to the water table flooding the mines. Now, when the mines were in operation, like a lot of mines in the area, specifically coal mines, they do go below the water table, which means they need to run pumps 24/7 to keep the water level down so they could work the areas, keep the men dry. But when the mines closed, the pumps turned off. So it says, due to the closure of mine water pumping operations in the Lackawanna Valley, their water table rose from 105 feet to 700 feet in the late 1950s to the early 1960s. And these mine companies that operated here was the Glen Alden, Moffett, and Hudson coal companies. The rising water table affected 24 households and threatened to harm up to 200 additional households. The borehole was drilled here in the ground in the winter of 1961 to 1962 by the Army Corps of Engineers. And the borehole is 42 inches in diameter and 300 feet deep, roughly 2 football fields down into the ground. Now, this is the really surprising and almost mind-blowing aspect of it, is that the underground reservoir, the water table area, is the size of Lake Wallenpaupack. Now, those of you from the area are familiar with that lake. You know that's a really large lake for our area, located near Hawley, Pennsylvania. That lake, or that reservoir, extends from Duryea, just down here, to Forest City, north of Carbondale. That's nearly the whole valley here that water table reservoir, or lake-sized table of water, does consume underneath that whole area, which is roughly 33 miles in length. Kind of hard to picture that underneath the ground. Now, there was proposed plans for a treatment plant to be constructed just downstream here to collect this water and extract the iron oxide and acidity part of it and to filter the water, sending out clear, clean water. As of 2024, the construction of that plant has not begun. Don't know what the plans are with that, but that is the proposed plans as of around over 10 years ago. But as of today, nothing is being done. So the water coming out of here is acidic, it stinks, it's rust colored, so obviously it's going to affect the fish and wildlife as well. If you would like another example as to what this borehole is like, well, I have featured another one on my channel just on the outskirts of Centralia. It's known as the Centralia Geyser. Although it's not in Centralia, it's on the outskirts of it, closer to or inside of Ashland, Pennsylvania. But there's a geyser there as well, that there's no concrete cap. Basically, it's just the hole coming out of the ground with a pipe. That is the same thing. They drilled it down to expel the mine water to basically release the water table from flowing up and creating sinkholes and flooding people's basements. And the term I used to the outflow of it is basically like a water balloon. So if you imagine when a water balloon is filled to capacity and you were to, put a hole in it, a pinhole, the water coming out of that's going to shoot pretty far with a lot of force. As that balloon shrinks and the pressure is not as strong, the water coming out of it is not as great. That's how these boreholes work. So the one in Centralia, there's times where the water coming out has just been a foot off the ground, and times it's been 15 feet off the ground. That all depends on the amount of water that the area has received, because as the water does seep through the ground, it fills up those cavities and creates a back pressure forcing the water out. Here it is similar, although we can't see the hole. The water does flow constantly, and just at different times it flows stronger or faster than others. I just got done capturing some underwater footage, which I'm going to share with you right now. Basically, the best way to describe this is the landscape beneath the surface, where it's all acidic and rust. Looks like the surface of another planet, like Mars, for example. It's just a bright orange color, and everything is stained. And there are some areas where there's little green, like seaweed or algae, so you get to see a good contrast of the orange and green. But what I can tell you though, is I just took the camera the best I could in the area where the water is discharging out of the concrete cap. The water is moving surprisingly fast. It's a stronger current than I was anticipating, because I actually almost lost this. Because I had it angled like this, and as the water is coming down, it caught the back of it and kind of almost ripped it out of my hands, flowing downstream. Thankfully, I had a good grasp on it, but it is flowing pretty strong. And this is after nearly a month of no rain. So I can only imagine how much stronger it will be, or could be, during normal conditions. But really fascinating area. Unfortunate circumstances, but this is the reality of the old coal mining days. It's not just here in Old Forge, Duryea, Pennsylvania. It's also down in West Pittston near the Knox mine disaster site. It's all acidic water there. There's also areas down near Coltmont and Shamokin and other areas that I've showed on other videos where acid mine drainage is finding its own way out, including right there near Centralia. So not much that we could do about it until those treatment plants do get constructed and they do find a way to collect the bad water and discharge clean water. But until then, this is the result. I covered enough for this spot. We're now going to head downstream south to the Susquehanna River. I'm going to go to the banks on Pittston and West Pittston to see how far out into the river we could get, to see what it looks like. But before we do that, I do want to give a special thanks to my nephew Josh for providing me the information on this really unique borehole area here in Old Forge. He actually provided me the information a few years ago, and I wasn't sure when I was going to need it or use it, but today I did. So thanks once again, Josh. And just like that, we are now on the banks of the Susquehanna River in Pittston, Pennsylvania. We're looking at the Fort Jenkins Bridge. The bridge behind it is the Water Street Bridge, which is closed and technically abandoned and is due for replacement, but not for a few years. This is the only bridge crossable here in the Pittston area. The next one is several miles down, the 8th Street Bridge, which I believe is Plains Township. But we're here standing along the river in an area where we would normally be underwater. I'm actually standing at the foot of an old boat ramp. And although it's an overcast day, hopefully it's coming through on camera, you could probably tell that these rocks and the ground itself are stained orange. Not a bright, vibrant orange like we've seen, but they are stained orange compared to the rest of the landscape here. And so is the entire bank of the Susquehanna River on the Pittston side heading over there, because over there is where the Lackawanna River that we just came from does meet and flow into the Susquehanna. So everything on basically this side, the east bank of the river, is stained orange. So even down here, it's not suitable conditions. Although this river is really popular with fishing and boating, and I'm sure people do swim in it, it's obviously not the best conditions due to the acid mine drainage. But it is neat to stand here though in an area where we normally would be underwater. And even looking at the bridge over there, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, you can see the high water mark or normal water mark right there on the left hand side. It's definitely closer to 10 feet from where it is right now. And there's a lot of exposed areas. And even as we're riding down here, you can't see it from here, but there's areas in the middle of the river that are just barely underwater. Like right in the middle, I could see like a sandbar from here, or a rock outcrop like you see right there, just a few inches beneath the surface. So until we get some significant rain, even more of the underneath surface is going to be exposed. I just noticed now too, there's actually 2 individuals on the other bank of the river over there. And we're gonna be heading over there pretty soon to check it out as well. But pretty fascinating to see what could transpire in just a few weeks with no rain, and how things could dramatically change, not only visually, but the things you can't see as well, like the threat of wildfires and the wells running dry and having to conserve water until levels do get back to where they're supposed to be at. We're now in West Pittston, standing behind the west bank of the Susquehanna River at a rather familiar location. This train bridge may be familiar to some of you watching, especially if you watched a video of mine from earlier this year where I started here at this bridge and rode my e-bike along this rail line all the way down to Swoyersville. And along the way, we documented the different sections of line and a lot of fascinating findings along the way. But the thing I'm noticing today from when I did that video is that this track has been cleared. There was a lot of overgrowth and it is nearly impassable, not only right here, but further down. But at least from what I can see here, looks like a lot of the brush has been cut away, and they may have used these tracks since I made that video, or may have plans to use it in the near future. This line is operated by Luzerne and Susquehanna Railway, which is a subsidiary of R.J. Corman. They have used these tracks, I know for a fact, about 4 or 5 years ago at the most. I've actually seen pictures or a short video clip of a switcher locomotive coming across the bridge and crossing the road here. But although it's not our point of focus today, I did want to point it out to you because I do find that intriguing. But we are going to go down on the banks of the river and get a unique perspective of this train bridge and to show you what the levels are like over here on the west bank of the river. Just came down below the bridge, not near the water yet, but I did find something of interest right here. This yellow tote with number 1A3 marked on it. I had no idea what this is. It is full of plastics and trash though. And there is a QR code. If you guys want to scan that, maybe it'll tell you what this is or where it came from, but it's down here along the bank of the river, and don't know why it's here, who brought it here, but it is surrounded by a lot of garbage though. It looks like someone maybe has attempted to clean it up. Maybe they're using it to clean it up. It looks like it's been sitting here for quite a while though. Once again, I am standing in an area where normally I'd be under several feet of water. This is exposed riverbed here. And it actually comes out pretty far. This is all river stone here. It's nice and smooth. Some moss right here in the water's edge. And as we get closer to the river, it gets more saturated, obviously. But if you follow me this way, you'll be able to get a nice, unique profile shot of this bridge. Which, if a train was to pass by now, that would make for some great footage. I would absolutely love it. I'd never witnessed a train cross this in person, only on a short video clip that a friend of mine shared. But this is a great time too for people that like to search for fossils or things that may have been dropped into the river or things that maybe have washed down that are now exposed. This is a prime time to do that. And I think that's what I saw some people doing along, I think this is Susquehanna Avenue up here. I saw them from across the other side, and there's a guy walking around, bending down, picking things up. So who knows what you could find during conditions like this. But as I come over here under the bridge, I'm noticing something else here that I don't know if I knew before, but I think this was a double bridge at one time. These concrete piers and supports are wide enough to fit another line or another bridge, whether that was a wooden trestle type, or if there's a steel girder bridge like this. I'm sorry, truss bridge. That I'm not certain of, but this definitely looks wide enough to hold two train lines. But there's also evidence that other people have been down here just back there, so I'll come get you. We'll go check it out together. I know it's gonna be hard to see it, but over there is a break in the trees in the landscape. That is the Lackawanna River flowing into the Susquehanna River. I'll actually give you a better shot of that using Google Earth. But that is where the acid mine drainage coming out of that borehole is spilling into the river here. See, the whole bank over there is all stained orange, as is the rocks and probably the fish and wildlife too. But right in front of us here, well, someone's been having some fun doing some rock stacking. I guess I will contribute and find a rock to place on top as well. We'll add to this pile and that pile. So for this one here, I think I'm gonna place a nice round rock on top of it. Not really good for stacking something else on top of it, but kind of like a topper of a tree. I guess you could call this nature's Christmas tree, although it's not made by nature, it is nature-related items, if you want to call it that. So let's see. Oh, there's a cat right there. There's a black cat with white paws walking right along the tree line here. Thought there was a person coming down. So we got that one, and let's come over here. We'll put something more flat. I'll put a nice, really flat one. This is actually a piece of maybe concrete. We'll do two pieces. We'll do that one and this one here. There we go. Made our contribution to the rock stacking here. Another thing I want to point out too is that along these support piers or columns, and like we've seen on other bridges and other locations, there are protective barriers. At the water's edge, there's a little, I guess you could say a V-shaped area of metal that's protruding out of the water to protect the concrete. But also up the edge of the concrete, which is pointed like an arrow, has a strip of metal on it. That's basically a protective barrier, so when items do come down river, whether it be rocks or trees, that the concrete does not sustain any damage. So they have that little wall area on the base of it, and then a metal strip going up almost to the top, just in case levels were to ever get that high, which this river does flood every so often, where the homes up here along Susquehanna Avenue do take in water. So Where I am right now normally would be underwater, but during flooding times, the water would be nearly at the top of the train bridge or higher. So just put that into perspective. That's a lot of water, really deep. But honestly, this is a really neat area now. There's actually an island there, which you could probably get to a lot easier than you could in the past, unless you used a boat or something like that. But different parts of the riverbed is exposed more than others. The banks of the river, you have different outcroppings, and you get to do things you normally can't do just based on normal water and river conditions and levels. But I'm gonna see if I can get down to where the individual was, because that area goes really far out, and I did see something sticking out of the water, and I may or may not bring you to the Pittston side once again, near the River Commons area, see what it looks like over there. Made it down to the area that I passed by to get to the train bridge, in the same area where there is an individual walking around over there that we saw from the opposite side. So this is an area that is really exposed, goes out quite a ways, but the thing that I found rather fascinating is that there's something right here behind you guys in front of me that I didn't know existed until today, since the water levels are as low as they are. Surprisingly enough, there's actually a picnic table down here, which I'm wondering if people maybe carry down here. Either that or it's always left here and it gets submerged. That I don't know. But as we come over here, walking on the bedrock here, or I should say the river rock, there's something that doesn't belong here by nature. And it is right here, a pipeline. This pipeline is covered underwater nearly 99% of the time, except for situations and occasions like this where we're in a drought and the river level is extremely low. And now it's actually forming a type of dam where all this blockage here can't pass over. I'm going to walk out on it as far as I can. It's actually not that bad. It's not slippery, as it has had sufficient time to dry out. If I was to guesstimate the diameter of it, let's see, I'm going to put my size 13 foot on it there. I'd say it's maybe about 20, 25 inches in diameter, give or take. And I have seen these before on a covert adventure where these are almost like sediment bags to control sediment, but they're actually made out of concrete, so when they get wet, they harden and they become like solid. And it's like erosion control almost. It's actually kind of rusted right there. So this blockage has formed a little natural pier to walk out on, just because everything had built up along it over the years. You can see into the water. It's really green, a lot of algae, mostly a rocky bottom. Not water I would really want to go into, at least here, due to the proximity of the acid mine drainage discharge. But we're going to keep going out a bit further, and as you're going to hear, the water is making a much louder sound because the water is flowing over the pipe just up here, and this is about as far as I'm going because the water is almost covering the pipe here. And right there is a little tiny spillway, and this pipe looks like it does go all the way across. I actually see a pipe, I'm sorry, that's a tree with a tire around it. I thought that was a section of pipe. Looks like this pipe though does go all the way across. So you can kind of see the water rippling over it like that, almost all the way across. And it's neat because on the left-hand side here, the water's only a few inches deep. Here, it's a few feet deep. And that's based on the sediment that's built up along it over the years. And there's almost like some seaweed or algae that's attached to it here, just flowing with the water current. So being out here, it's hard to put it into perspective, but we're almost halfway across the river, kind of. Looking back at the bridge, that's where we just were. So that's the R.J. Corman Bridge, and as we come over this side, we have the Fort Jenkins Bridge right there. So we are kind of a halfway point right now, not only between the two bridges, but also across the river. This river is pretty wide though. It's several hundred yards across, and this is at low levels. You know, when the water level is higher, obviously it's a larger surface of water to go across. But pretty fascinating. I'd never be able to do this if it wasn't for these conditions, the drought conditions, and I never knew this pipe even existed until today. So a couple firsts for me on this little journey documenting the drought conditions here in Northeast Pennsylvania. But I will say, despite this river not being the best conditions, it is relatively clear right now. Very little silt or sediment floating around, and it's an overcast day, and I can still see clear to the bottom at least 3-4 feet. So a lot of times this river is pretty murky and cloudy and you can't see the bottom. But of course that side is all stained orange, so it's even the worst of the two sides. If I was to say which side of the river is better, obviously it's going to be the west bank of the river. That's probably the side that most people would fish from or launch their boat or kayak or even swim in if they had to choose. Just walking around looking at the ground, seeing if anything stands out, and I did find this pouch right here. Ozark Trail. I think that's maybe Walmart brand. Looks like it may have been a multi-tool. Looks like they lost their pouch, whether they were down here probably with some waders on, fishing. We'll leave it here on the picnic table in case someone does come down and maybe look for it now that their levels are low. Well, this is something I could say I've never done. Sitting at a picnic table that is normally where water would be, partway across a river, and I'm bone dry. Now this video is not a video I plan on making. I just decided to, for two reasons. Number one is because we haven't had a drought like this in quite a while. We actually had a pretty wet summer, and now that we're in a dry spell for, I don't even know how many days it is or how many weeks it is, but I know it's close to a month, if not longer. This is not something that happens all that often here, at least in Northeast Pennsylvania. So not only is it not a super common occurrence, but number two is that there's actually projected rain tonight, but it's not enough to do any kind of fixing of the situation. So we're supposed to get, I think, maybe 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch, and that's not gonna take away the water restrictions, it's not going to fill up wells, it's not going to take away the burn ban. The only thing it's going to really do is just help get the ground wet to prevent natural forest fires and to give some of the wildlife, you know, a rinse from the dust and everything like that. So tonight's rain's by no means going to fix the situation. It's going to take a few good inches of rainfall within a shorter amount of time to kind of get where we need to be. And also, too much rain all at once could also create havoc where the ground is now really dry and hard and brittle. And if it does rain, anything substantial, the ground won't be able to soak it in. It'll create flooding problems. So it'll be the exact opposite of what we have now. But I thought it was a unique opportunity to come and do this, to show you what it's like, to share the current conditions. And it makes me wonder what the winter is going to be like here, which is just around the corner. Is it going to be a rather dry, mild, calm winter? Or is it going to be the exact opposite? And I'm looking because one of two individuals that are down here is actually metal detecting. So that's also another good thing to do when the river levels are low. Check out for any submerged findings. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the look along the Lackawanna and Susquehanna River. More so, hope you enjoyed what you learned about the borehole there in Old Forge. It is a fascinating spot, and wish I got to it sooner. I just never had a reason to. Didn't want to make a dedicated video of it just because it's nothing all that substantial. It is just something unique with the coal mining history here in Pennsylvania. Also, wherever you are, if you are experiencing a drought situation like this, feel free to share down below in the comments what it's like, if there are any restrictions put in place, or if there's any things that have happened due to the lack of rainfall. Anyways, thanks so much for coming along with me for this short bike ride as we checked out the levels of the Lackawanna and Susquehanna rivers and got to see some interesting and unique things. I had a good time. Hopefully you did as well. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.